You're a Jags fan, you're an NFL fan, you clicked this video for a reason. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment on the channel, on the video, your thoughts. Find us on your preferred podcast streaming platform. Let's get this going. What is he doing? Nah, bro, I think he's legit. You just can't do that in that situation. Nah, you couldn't be more wrong. Yeah, I could agree with that. This is the Poogie Podcast. What is going on, Pooge crew? Thank you for tuning into episode 142 of the Poogie Podcast. Big episode for you today. No recap, obviously. The Jaguars coming off a bye, but we will look ahead to this week's matchup against the Baltimore Ravens and other news around the NFL from Week 11 and looking forward to Week 12. Hopefully everyone's having a great week. Happy Turkey Day. Happy Thanksgiving week. Whatever it is, enjoy some football tomorrow on Thursday for Thanksgiving. But let's welcome in Kyle. Thank you for being here, bro.
Yeah, happy to be back. Nice to have this past Sunday off. As a Jags fan, don't have to worry about it or anything like that.
What are your overall thoughts on a bye week? Like, how do you vibe with the bye? Is it enjoyable? Do you like watching all the other games, not having to worry about the Jags? Do you have FOMO? What are your thoughts on a bye week for your team?
Yeah, I kind of like it. I mean, I feel like when you're a really good team, a bye is good to try to take a week off to, for injuries and whatnot, really get your head right for the next couple of games down the stretch for playoffs. As a bad team, it's a chance to kind of reflect on the games so far and, how we're going to finish the season strong, even if we're not going to make the playoffs. Try to grab a couple wins. So I'd imagine, from a team standpoint, they're doing a little bit of everything. From a fan standpoint, you're just enjoying football around the league. No stress, no worries, nothing like that.
Yeah, especially for those that play fantasy football, you're obviously in the kind of the home stretch of the regular season. So you got your eyes on all the TVs, NFL Red Zone, watching your guys try and put up points for your team. But I had quite a busy Sunday, so I was kind of relieved that the Jags weren't playing. I didn't have to try and make time to watch them play. But it did give me a chance to watch some of the other games, including the Ravens-Panthers game, which if you're watching on YouTube, you can see behind me. Also watched the Eagles-Colts game. Both ended up to be great finishes in those. Both my roommates, respectively, Eagles and Ravens fans. So got a chance to watch the Ravens pretty in-depth last week. For as much as I could watch them. And that's what we're here to talk about today. Jaguars-Ravens coming up. I mean, Jags coming off a 27-17 loss to the Chiefs 2 weeks ago. And now you have a team coming into Jacksonville after the team hasn't played here in a few weeks. So coming home in front of the home crowd on Thanksgiving weekend. But it's a very similar team, if you will, team makeup as the Chiefs. Not really a running team as far as having an elite running back. You have an elite tight end. You kind of have some pieces at receiver that can make plays, but ultimately it comes down to how good the quarterback can play. Similar to Patrick Mahomes, what is Lamar Jackson, going to be able to do to help his team win this football game? So fairly similar play styles, schemes, if you will. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, there's definitely a lot more firepower on the Chiefs than the Ravens. The Ravens do have a decent run game, though. They're second in the league in rushing yards per game. Granted, that's not a ton by the running back. Like you said, it's not like they have a workhorse running back necessarily. It is Lamar Jackson getting a lot of rushing yards as well. Kenyon Drake has been a good add for them, and he has been playing well lately. So similar in the fact that they got a star quarterback, that they have a coach and a team that understand how to get the job done, how to make big plays. The difference is I think it'll be a little less downfield type stuff that the Chiefs bring to the table and a little more, read options and rushing off tackle with Lamar Jackson.
And is it any concern to you when you talk about a running quarterback? The Jaguars have played 2, maybe 3 mobile quarterbacks. You obviously have Jalen Hurts. You have Patrick Mahomes, and then Danny Dimes. Daniel Jones put up over 100 rushing yards against us. In those games, the opposition put up 210 rushing yards against the Jags, with a large part coming from the quarterback position. How big of a concern is that for the Jaguars in this matchup?
Definitely concerning. If you don't scheme for it, if you don't go into the game knowing how you are going to contain the quarterback and make him pass or make the running back beat you on the ground, it can be a long day, because it can be the most frustrating time. And this is when you see it the most, is on third and mid to third and long situations where they play back, they drop, the linebackers maybe back off, and you just bring 3 or 4 down linemen, gives them time. Wide receivers get down the field. There just happens to be part of the field that's wide open, and they can pick up the first down. If they don't pick up the first down, maybe they bring it to 4th and 1 and they go for it. So I think that's when a running quarterback is the most dangerous, on those third and medium, third and long situations, where the defense is just playing to keep everything in front of them. As far as the pass, they end up letting the quarterback sneak out and get the first down.
Yeah, and the Jaguars' run defense this year against running backs, maybe wide receivers out of the backfield, hasn't been the worst. It hasn't been the best either, but it's been kind of a bright spot for our young defense that we've really looked at. Obviously, depth is an issue up front. We don't have depth as far as the big men go, and we saw the Eagles struggle with that, actually, when Jordan Davis went out. They went out and they got Linval Joseph, who's a guy that I feel like's been around for 15-plus years. They went out and got Ndamukong Suh. They addressed it. Obviously, they're a team with Super Bowl aspirations. We are not. We are trying to just see what we have on this roster, but 4.2 yards per carry to running backs. However, 4.5 yards per carry to quarterbacks on the season. So that is kind of concerning. The quarterbacks almost picking up a full first down every 2 carries they get. And to make matters worse, Lamar Jackson, let me read this, 6.9 yards per carry on the season, and he's averaging 66.6 yards per game rushing the ball. Last week against Carolina, the rushing attack for the Ravens wasn't really there. Kenyon Drake, I think, led the way with like 34 yards, but Lamar Jackson was right there with 31. Ravens end up winning a game 13-3 over the Panthers. And after watching the game, the duration of the game, you just kind of figured out this is what the game flow is going to be. It was an ugly game. It wasn't a clean game at all. Did you get a chance to see any of the Ravens-Panthers game or kind of catch up on it at all?
Not really. I mean, I was watching mainly Red Zone, so that game wasn't popping on the TV too much. I saw some of the highlights. It looked just like a slow, boring game. Like you alluded to, Lamar Jackson didn't have a crazy rushing stat line or anything like that. Kudos to the Panthers for keeping that game close and, really making the Ravens grind out that win.
Yeah, it was a 3-0 game at halftime. The Ravens had a 15-play, 76-yard drive to close the first half. Got a field goal, 3-0 at halftime, almost 3-3 going into the fourth quarter. And the turning point of the game, or really kind of where it changed, was the Ravens got 2 interceptions on the Panthers' final 2 drives. And that just iced the game. I think one was a swat at, like a batted ball, and the other one, a cornerback jumped a route and picked it off. And that kind of iced the game. The Ravens go on to win by 10. But the Ravens are a good enough team to find ways to win when the game plan or when the game flow isn't their speed. And the Panthers are a bad enough team to where if you don't show up your best, you can still find a way to win that game. Is that something that we might see here with the Jaguars, where are the Jaguars just that much better of a team than the Panthers, where if the Jags come out and play somewhat competitive, they can beat the Ravens based on what the Ravens did last week?
Yeah, I mean, and like we've talked about before in this podcast, that we've been putting together good drives, long drives. We're 9th in yards per game. We're 7th in rushing yards per game. So I know I mentioned the Ravens being 2nd in rushing yards per game in the league. We're 7th. So this is 2 top 7 rushing teams as far as yards per game are concerned going at it. So it can certainly be a time of possession battle where we're just milking the clock, both of us hopefully going on long drives. That's kind of what I'm thinking we go into this game doing. They're probably going to try to play the same type of game. As far as the rushing defense, we're both decent at that. I think we're 10th in the league in yards per game that we let up on the ground, but they're 3rd. They let up only 86 yards per game. I'm thinking back 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we played the Broncos, who play that kind of slow-styled offense, heavy defense, slow offense. They only had 100 yards rushing. And then the Raiders a couple weeks ago, I think only had like 76 yards rushing. And then, of course, we played the Chiefs our last time out, and we give up like 160 on the ground. So if we can contain Lamar and stop the run and make them pass, I think you kind of can have a similar game to the Raiders game where, both teams maybe get up into the 20s. I'm not sure, though. We'll see, kind of I feel like the first quarter usually indicates how the game's going to go. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And for the record, I don't think you need to play a perfect game to beat the Jaguars. We are not that type of team. I think the Jaguars in a game like last week that saw the Ravens versus the Panthers 13-3. I think the Jaguars, if the game goes like that, can find a way to win that style game just with how we play football. Maybe a little bit more talented than the Panthers. But last week versus Carolina, the Ravens defense allowed 36 yards on the ground and 2.1 yards a carry. It was 17 carries. So just absurd numbers on the defensive side for the Ravens last week, which led to that low-scoring affair against Carolina. But Travis Etienne, 3 of his last 4 games, over 100 yards rushing. You mentioned the Chiefs game. I think that was his only game in the last 4 that he hasn't eclipsed 100 yards rushing. He's averaging 5.5 yards per carry. And then over the last month or so, we've seen Trevor Lawrence kind of get involved in the running game. Could we maybe try and see the Jaguars match Lamar Jackson's ability on the ground with Trevor Lawrence, or is this going to be a game where you just need to see Trevor Lawrence kind of stay in the pocket and throw?
Yeah, and I love the quarterbacks being able to run and stuff, but I don't think Lawrence is the guy that works great with the design runs. He's not a huge accelerator like Mahomes and Lamar, where he can get that quick first step. I think he's good when he's scrambling. I think the quarterback sneaks have worked out well this year so far. We saw it in the Chiefs game. We talked about it last week. We did a 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2, kind of like QB sweep to the right, and got absolutely stuffed. I don't think we need to play around with that. I think if we're going to run it, design runs, let's just stick with the running backs. ETN's been picking up over 5 yards a clip, like you mentioned. So I don't think we want to try to get too cute with the playbook. Trevor Lawrence has also been able to make incredible throws to the outside on 3rd and short situations. So I definitely want to see some more of that in short yardage.
Yeah, and to your point, I think Trevor Lawrence is best on the ground when he is throwing the ball and able to scramble. I don't like the design runs either. But you look at like a guy like Patrick Mahomes, he's successful scrambling because he's also a huge threat in the passing game to where they can't stack the box. And very, very few times our defense is able to play a design quarterback run defense against Mahomes because he'll just beat you in the air. Yeah. So I think if you can get Trevor Lawrence comfortable, you can have him completing some passes, some extended drives, you get the defense kind of back on their heels in coverage. That opens up some running lanes maybe for Trevor Lawrence in this one. But let's get to the tight end position, because we did mention it with Travis Kelce and the Chiefs. He kind of ate us up, I think, for about 80 yards. Ironically, it was one of his quieter games of the season. I think he had 4 touchdowns a few weeks ago, and then he had 3 touchdowns on Sunday night. Is that correct?
I think he had 4 in a game, and then he did have 3 this past week. So insane. Yeah,
so the Jaguars holding him to 80 yards and a touchdown kind of felt like a victory. But you have Mark Andrews coming back for the Ravens. Last week he came back from injury. He had 6 catches on 8 targets for 63 yards. So he's another guy. Obviously, I don't think he's as athletic as Travis Kelce, and I don't think Lamar Jackson delivers as good of a ball as Patrick Mahomes. But at the end of the day, the best receiving threat on the Ravens is Mark Andrews. And the Jaguars' defense against tight ends has not been that great. We're allowing a quarterback rating of, I think it's around 114 exactly, to tight ends. So when quarterbacks are targeting tight ends, we're allowing 114 quarterback rating. All other pass attempts to receivers, running backs, whatever, we're allowing a 90 quarterback rating. So that's a huge disparity, and that's a huge hole in this defense. Keys to stopping Mark Andrews or trying to limit that as a passing attack option for the Ravens.
Yeah, I think, we can't just put a linebacker on Mark Andrews and expect that to do the job. I think if you get a nickel in there and have somebody kind of spy on Mark Andrews to an extent, they have 3 receivers. Who is it? Bateman, Duvernay, and
DeMarcus Robinson.
Yeah, and they're all pretty fast receivers, though.
Rashad Bateman is out, though.
Oh, he is? Okay.
Yeah.
So we know where they're going with the ball. I do think their wide receivers are pretty fast, though. So we'll see how our secondary holds up against them. But I think, or even dropping a lineman at times into the middle of the field just to kind of clog that up. But because what happens with tight ends for the most part is, and when you watch Travis Kelce and some of these elite tight ends, they're not running any crazy routes. They're not like beating anybody with speed. They're not doing a quick first step off the line. They're literally floating into where nobody's at. The quarterback and the tight end have a good connection kind of mentally where, if I see an open spot, I'm going to run there and you hit me. And that's all it is. And then there's a ton of yards after catch with Travis Kelce, a 4-yard slant that turns into a 30-yard game-winning touchdown run. They just find the open positions and the open spots on the field. So I feel like, for the Jags to stop Mark Andrews from having a crazy game, manning him up with somebody that can keep up with him. Like I said, sometimes the linebackers or whatever can be too slow or not that great in man coverage. So putting like maybe a bigger cornerback or a safety on him that can, stay on his hip is the way to win.
Yeah, the best tight ends are the ones that can always find like that soft coverage, that soft spot, and just like sit there in a hole. And the quarterback finds him. Maybe it's the last option, who knows? But they're the ones that can get that separation and sit there and just receive the ball for a first down, or like you mentioned with Kelce, extending it for a game-winning touchdown against the Chargers like we saw on Sunday night. So here, I'll ask you a question real quick, unless you're looking it up right now. How many passing yards did Lamar Jackson have on Sunday? Do you know?
This past Sunday?
Yeah.
Well, I saw earlier like 201 or something.
209. Okay. Kenyon Drake or Demarcus Robinson and Mark Andrews combined for 191 receiving yards. So over 92% of Lamar Jackson's passing yards went to two guys. So to me, it's pretty clear. You stop Demarcus Robinson and you stop Mark Andrews, you can stop Lamar Jackson through the air. Obviously, that still opens up his rushing ability. But that's a pretty insane number to me. He had 24 completions. 15 of them were to those two. Demarcus Robinson actually had a hell of a game. 9 catches for 128 yards. So that's going to be someone to watch. Hopefully Tyson Campbell can lock him up, because he's kind of been a diamond in the rough for the Jags since they drafted him out of Georgia. So we'll see how that goes. But to the Jaguars' offensive side of the ball, I know we hit on Travis Etienne. Trevor Lawrence has looked night and day from last year. He's looked a lot better. He's making the right decisions. He's got 13 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. He's averaging about 235 yards per game this year. But he's going up against a defense that is allowing 86.8 passer rating on the season to quarterbacks. So this might be one of his toughest tests he's faced yet. What are the keys to Trevor Lawrence, succeeding through the air in this one with Christian Kirk and Zay Jones and even Evan Ingram?
Yeah, I just not trying to do too much and not trying to win the game in one play, every play. And I'm not necessarily saying he does that, but understanding that, hey, throwing the ball away is better than fumbling it or taking a sack. If it's not there, run it. If you get 1 or 2 yards, that's okay. It's better than taking a sack. And then I think just as long as the playbook and the passes are schemed well to his strengths, like you mentioned earlier, he is so good on the run throwing the ball. And when you have those rollouts or play actions where he can get his legs moving, if there's nobody in front of him, he can just pull it down and take off and run. And then that will open up passes, right? Like if he does roll out the next time and then a linebacker or a cornerback maybe comes down off of a receiver, you dump it over their head to the tight end or running back right there. So just keeping plays like that. We've also talked about how we don't have explosive plays, crazy things down the field. If it's not there, don't force it. I know Christian Kirk can get open. He dropped one last week. That would have been a 30-yard pass. So clearly he can get open. And if it's there, take it. But, really just not forcing anything. If it's not there, make the smart play. And that's something else we've talked about, how kind of that quick decisions have not been great, especially in scoring opportunities, interceptions, fumbles, what have you. We just got to be smarter with the ball.
Yeah, and what scares me about this matchup is there's not one aspect of the Ravens defense that we can look at and say, okay, we can exploit that, because they're a very well-rounded defense, very well-balanced defense, good in both run defense and pass defense. Whereas with the Chiefs, we identified, okay, we can maybe beat them through the air. They're not one of the top defensive teams against the pass. Maybe they're better against the run, whatever it is. But in this situation, I don't think this is going to be a game where if the Jags win, it's because Travis Etienne rushes for 150 yards. but I also don't think it's going to be because Trevor Lawrence throws for 300 yards. It's going to be, Travis Etienne rushes for 75 yards, picks up some crucial third down conversions. Lawrence throws for maybe 215, 220, and throws 2 touchdowns. Maybe Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk get involved. But ultimately, to win this game against this type of defense, they're going to have to do it and make the most of the possessions they have, because the defense, and we can't give them extra possessions. The other thing is with the Ravens is, like at the end of that game against the Panthers, to close out the game with 2 interceptions and just ice the game, you can tell your offense isn't really getting the job done. And you're able to come out there on defense and get 2 interceptions to stymie the Panthers.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a big deal. That's concerning to me too, because we've seen some mistakes happen where the Jaguars shoot themselves in the foot. Well, this is a Ravens defense that can make you shoot yourselves in the foot. And that's concerning to me. But Calais Campbell returning to Jacksonville, obviously a huge member of the 2017 magical run to the AFC Championship. So I know fans are going to be excited to see him coming back, obviously not wearing the black and purple. Not going to be excited about that aspect of it. But he's like 35 years old, and he is still a force to be reckoned with. They go out and they get Jason Pierre-Paul. They trade for Roquan Smith. They have Patrick Queen. This defense has a lot of guys. And we haven't even mentioned Kyle Hamilton yet. Probably a top 3 safety in the NFL. He's a rookie out of Notre Dame. Some were saying he's the best pure player in the NFL draft this last April. And he fell all the way, I think, to 14. The Ravens drafted him, and he has made a huge impact on this Ravens defense. So it's going to be a fun one to watch. Anything else from you before we move forward to the rest of the NFL?
Yeah, well, is Kyle Hamilton playing? I know he was hurt. Has he been playing in games?
Yeah, I think he just played last week.
Yeah, he did. It looks like he has been playing. I was just curious because I think he was hurt at some point. But no, my only real thoughts is like looking back at the Ravens. Their games this year, they haven't won a ton of games super convincingly. Like we said, Carolina last week, they win by 10. They kind of pull away at the end there. And then New Orleans before that, they won by 2 scores. But before that, you had the Buccaneers, who obviously are not that great. They won by 5. They beat the Browns by 3 before that, the Giants by 4.
They lost to the Giants.
Yeah, they lose to the Giants by 4. They beat the Bengals by 2. Close game against Buffalo. I mean, they have had a rather tough schedule. It looks like from the teams they're playing, but again, they're not winning anything overly convincingly like the Chiefs have been able to do from time to time. Winning by double digits pretty regularly.
Yeah, I mean, their largest margin of victory was 15 points, I think, against the Jets, if I'm looking at this correctly, in week 1.
Yep.
They blew a massive lead in that week 2 game against the Dolphins, 21-point lead in the 4th quarter. They blew that one. That's kind of when the Tua craziness started with the Dolphins. You go out and beat a Patriots team that at the time wasn't that high. You lose to the Bills. The crazy thing is they're not beating anyone convincingly, but they're also not losing that big either. Like, their losses are by, 3 points, 4 points, and 4 points?
Yeah, and you could argue those are all going to be playoff teams more than likely. So,
yeah, that's true. I mean, you have the Dolphins by 4, you have the Bills by 3, and then you have the Giants by 4. So, yeah, their 3 losses have been very competitive games. Their wins have been closer games than you would expect. They are 2-0 in the division, and they are atop the division with a game in hand over a game in hand over the Bengals by beating them in the division. So, this is a team that is hitting their stride at the right time. They're getting hot at the right time, and they're looking very good after a shaky start to the season. But let's get to predictions for this one. I will say, very weirdly, I'm kind of not confused by this, but Baltimore's only favored by like 3.5, I think.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which I thought was interesting. A 7-3 team versus a 3-7 team. I feel like Vegas is not buying into the Jags are bad. Yeah,
they've kind of loved the Jaguars this year.
Yeah, they're thinking that there's something happening in Jacksonville that maybe none of us recognize.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like what we talked about, except for that Chiefs game. That's the only game they've lost this year. That's been by 2 possessions. The only game they haven't let in. Vegas makes notes of that. Those are signs of competitive teams. So I'm thinking that's got to be part of it. And then the other part of it is the Ravens just played a very close game against the Panthers, way closer than it should have been. They were 13-point favorites. They end up winning by 7, but for most of the game they were tied or barely leading. So, or they win the game by 10, excuse me, but still, not getting to that cover will hurt your next week kind of outlook.
Yeah, no, I agree. That makes sense. Well, maybe we'd be getting the Ravens at a discount then, if you will, coming off that last performance. But let's get to predictions for Jags Ravens, 1 p.m. Eastern on Sunday here in Jacksonville. What are your thoughts on this game? Your prediction?
Yeah, I actually think I kind of talked myself into the Jags after all this. I mean, we do win like one weird game towards the end of the season every year that potentially shakes up somebody's playoff chances. The Ravens, again, they haven't been as scary as the years past. I think with our defense, if we're able to stop the rush and stop Lamar Jackson, we can hang in the game. I'm going to go the Jaguars win this 24-21.
I like it. I mean, that gets me hype. Having at least one Jaguars win prediction on here is awesome. I'm not going to be so bullish on the Jaguars just yet, just because I think Lamar Jackson on the ground is going to be the difference maker. Also, Justin Tucker is a huge difference maker for a Jaguars defense that has played very well. If the Ravens can just get to the 40-yard line, that's pretty much a guaranteed 3 points for them. You get a 57-yard field goal for Tucker every time you get to the 40-yard line. That's kind of unfair in my opinion. I'm going to say this is actually a low-scoring game. I'm going to go with 20-17. Ravens win this one. I think there's just too much there for Jackson on the ground to take advantage of, and Jags keep it close, maybe even winning at halftime. Who knows? But Ravens end up taking this one. But I do like your thought, how you said the Jaguars do beat a random team to kind of throw their playoff chances or their odds out of whack. So that's kind of a good note. You look down the line, you got the Titans, the Cowboys, the Jets, and the Titans still.
I was going to say it very well could be the Jets towards the end of the year where they need a win to maintain the I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but the Jets are not in a good spot right now.
Yeah, well, that kind of takes us into our NFL talk. And again, if you're listening, appreciate you being here. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment your thoughts. Go find us on your preferred podcast streaming platform as well if you want to listen to us on the go. I know a 45-minute video can be a lot to sit through, but listening to us on the go at the gym or in the car is always fun as well. But you look at what's going on with the Jets right now. We'll just talk about the NFL because Mike White gets the starting nod for Zach Wilson, and then Sam Darnold gets the starting nod in Carolina for Baker Mayfield. So some quarterback carousel already happening. What's weird is Zach Wilson's 5-2 on the season, but he has played like absolute dog shit. And maybe the Jets think that they could have a better record if it wasn't for him. Like they're 6-4 right now, which is I would presume Jets fans would say 6-4 is a win. But when your defense is playing at the level they're playing at, maybe 7-3 or 8-2 is on the table, and they're just disappointed with Wilson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you heard his comments after the game this past week. Not to beat a dead horse, it's been talked about everywhere, but you threw for 77 yards. Your defense held them to 3 points, or what was it?
Yeah, it was 10-3.
Yeah, 10-3. So you hold the Patriots, who have had your number for the last 7 years. The defense holds them to 10. And then when asked about, did you let the defense down? The answer was no. Just a weird vibe. It shows maybe he's not aware that he is the problem, or at least the problem in that game. Somebody compared it side by side, and I'm not trying to put Trevor Lawrence on a pedestal, but they showed Trevor Lawrence's post-game interviews on some of those terrible games he's had, throwing interceptions on the goal line, fumbling, and he's fully taken accountability. Most of the time, the NFL players know that you need to take accountability. There's tape on it. They're going to see the flaws and where you went wrong. And for Zach Wilson to just not really get that is kind of alarming.
Yeah, and there were some videos from that game against the Patriots where he was just overthrowing receivers, not finding the open receiver, and just really his progression looks more like regression over the last 2 months. It hasn't looked like it's panned out for the Jets. But thank you to Frank Gore for beating the Rams 2 years ago, allowing the Jags to get the first overall pick to draft Trevor Lawrence. So we're not sitting in that boat. But who knows what's going to happen. I guess Mike White's coming in, and obviously he had a magical 2 games, like 2 years ago or something, and it was fun,
Right.
or last year, I think. And we'll see what they can do. But for a team that's 6-4, that's on the brink of the playoffs, really not a position you want to be in, not having a quarterback. And the way that the Jets lost last week was unbelievable. The punt return to lose 10-3.
Oh, so dumb.
Yeah.
I mean, I talk about special teams on here, and whoever agree with me or disagree or don't care. Most of the time, it's I just don't care about special teams. They just lost the game because of it. The one thing you don't do is kick it to the return guy, and he kicked a line drive punt right to him. It makes zero sense.
Yeah. I mean, your defense allows 3 points the whole game. Your special teams gives up a touchdown to lose with like 10 seconds left. Obviously, that's painful for the Jets, but it is what it is. And then in Carolina, another team that just put up 3 points, they've benched Baker Mayfield, who I feel like has been in and out of the starting job there for the last 2 months, depending on the week and whatever the coach is feeling like. That's the other thing I was going to say real quick, actually. Robert Saleh doesn't seem like the kind of head coach that's going to put up with that bullshit from Zach Wilson. Like, he seems like the head coach that wants a quarterback that's going to take accountability, and he's not going to be the kind of coach that's like going to protect a player or anything like that. So,
yeah, absolutely. He's been well liked this year. It seems like he's a player's coach, all that, talking a big game before the season about we're going to be taking receipts and all that. They have kind of backed it up. Unfortunately, they stumbled, losing 2 of the last 3 games, both to the Patriots. So we'll see what Mike White can do this week. Luckily, they are playing the Bears. Maybe that provides for a little bit of a cushion or an easier game than if it were the following week against the Vikings.
Yeah, I agree. We'll see what happens there. But let's get to the rest of Week 11 real quick. What are we buying after Week 11 in the NFL, Kyle?
That Dan Campbell might keep his job. We'll see how he plays this week against the Bills, but now they're 4-6. They have won 3 in a row. A couple weeks ago, I think we talked about it, and I said I don't want to see Dan Campbell get fired. Well, they beat the Packers, the Bears, and the Giants, so 2 divisional opponents, and then a Giants team that is on the brink of making the playoffs. They have the Bills this week, and then the Jags, the Vikings, Jets, Panthers, Bears, Packers to finish the season. So, again, some winnable games in there. I think if they get to the 6-win threshold, that Dan Campbell certainly keeps his job. So he's been a fun coach, likable and all that. So I'm happy to see that again. I know a team that's not going to make the playoffs, maybe not the best. What are we buying? But I think Dan Campbell winning 3 in a row is huge for him to stay coach there.
No, that's big time. Definitely for the Lions and for him. What I will say is for a team with 6 losses, 3 of those losses are by 4 points or less. 38-35 to the Eagles, 48-45 to the Seahawks, and then 31-27 to the Dolphins.
And 28-24 to the Vikings.
And 28-24. So 4 losses by 4 points or less, all to potential playoff teams. Maybe not the Seahawks. We'll see what happens there, but they should win the division, it feels like. But to the Eagles, they're going to win the East, it feels like. To the Vikings, they'll win the North. And to the Dolphins, they'll be in the playoffs at least as a wild card. So 4 losses by 4 points or less. Biggest loss was 29-0 to the Patriots, which is kind of an outlier on their season. But other than that, the Lions have looked very good. I'm going to go ahead and just buy the Dallas Cowboys. It's not very often a team puts up 40 points in the NFL, but it's not very often a team wins by 37 in the NFL. And that's exactly what happened against a 1-loss Vikings team last week. 40-3 in Minnesota, game of the week. I was hyping it up on here last week. I was excited for it when I was watching it, and the Vikings couldn't do anything. I don't know if it says more about the Vikings or it says more about the Cowboys, but the Cowboys have found something special, and Tony Pollard had over 100 yards out of the backfield receiving. He's a great receiving back for Dak Prescott. CeeDee Lamb is obviously still a huge problem. Michael Gallup's a problem, and there's a chance that Odell Beckham ends up on the Cowboys at some point. Maybe that ruins everything, or maybe it helps. I don't know, but I'm going to go ahead and buy the Cowboys. They're in a fantastic spot right now.
Nice, yeah, I like that.
What are we selling after Week 11? And I could easily say the Vikings.
Yeah, well, no, I'm going to go with kind of what I alluded to earlier, the Jets. I said it earlier this year, probably 3 or 4 episodes ago, I think, when they lost to the Patriots, maybe it was. I'm not sure. But I just – not saying they're not a good team. They have a great defense, but them being in a very tough division, the AFC, if they make the playoffs, is going to be very tough. But I don't know. I kind of have a feeling that the Bears might beat them this week, and then they got the Vikings and the Bills back to back after that. So I think they could go on that would be a 4-game losing streak here. Starting Mike White, nothing against Mike White. He just hasn't been playing this year with the team very much. They started with Flacco. They bring in Wilson. Now they're trying Mike White. I think that's a lot of disorganization, not a lot of consistency as far as the lineup. And usually that doesn't work out great for teams.
And hitting on that, I'm going to say maybe this is a surprise of the season, but I'm going to sell the Rams at this point. Obviously, they lost Cooper Kupp to injury. Matt Stafford's been injured over the last 2 or 3 weeks, but Sean McVay was talking about retiring last offseason. I think he might retire this offseason, take a $10 million job in the booth to call football games for Fox or whatever. That team's in shambles. And they just dropped Darrell Henderson. They just released Darrell Henderson Jr. After all of the controversy around Cam Akers all season. Darrell Henderson's the one that they dropped. They don't have it together, and they will not have it together. I don't know if they're going to win another game this season. And 3-7 is the worst 10-game start for the reigning Super Bowl champions in NFL history. So 3-7 to start the season is not good. Doesn't get easier for them. They travel to Arrowhead to play the Chiefs. They have the Seahawks at home. Maybe they beat the Raiders at home. Go to Green Bay to play the Packers, Broncos, Chargers, Seahawks. So all very losable games for a team that just lost to the Saints and the Cardinals in consecutive weeks. And we've seen what the Cardinals did, losing 38-10 last week or on Monday night. And the Saints are in disarray too, not knowing who's going to play, who's going to start. They're making the most of what they can do or of what they can with what they have, I guess. But the Rams, selling the Rams. You selling anything else this week?
No, that's probably it. I'm running out of teams to sell, I feel like.
I know. I feel like we've sold Russell Wilson like 10 times already. But again, losing to the Raiders.
Sell him again. Sell him again. I don't care.
Again. Yeah.
Buy him back just to sell him.
Yeah, buy low, sell high. Texans also benched Davis Mills. I don't know if you saw that.
What does that mean?
Here's what it means. I'll tell you a fun Davis Mills stat. Okay. Davis Mills has started 21 games as an NFL quarterback. What is his record overall?
How many times has he played the Jags in that span?
Twice.
Okay, so he's 2-19.
He's 3-17-1 with 2 of those wins coming against the Jags.
Okay, yeah.
So he's 1-17-1 against the rest of the NFL, but he's 2-0 against the Jags.
Tie against the Colts earlier this year, right?
Yeah. So maybe the Texans keep him around just to play the Jags for a guaranteed dub.
He's their specialist.
But yeah, that's interesting. And the Commanders, obviously, they beat the Texans, but they're above 500 now. So the whole NFC East just looks very good at the moment. All teams in the NFC East are above 500. Look at that.
Crazy.
Is that the same for the AFC East? With the Patriots winning? Yeah. AFC East.
Yeah. I saw that earlier.
7-3 Dolphins, 7-3 Bills, 6-4 Patriots, 6-4 Jets.
Crazy.
And then the NFC East, 9-1 Eagles, 7-3 Cowboys, 7-3 Giants, 6-5 Commanders. Those are going to be some fun divisional battles to watch coming down the stretch. But let's get to best game of Week 12. Let's look ahead to Week 12 of the NFL football season. 3 games coming up tomorrow real quick, so let's hit on those for Thanksgiving Day football. Briefly, some Thanksgiving Day football. Bills at Lions, Giants at Cowboys, Patriots at Vikings. Thoughts on those 3 games? Anything come to mind with those?
I think they should all 3 be pretty good. I mean, the Bills are 9-point favorites and the Cowboys are 10.5-point favorites. I don't necessarily see those games being that big of a blowout. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites. That probably got cut down from maybe like a 5-point, 4-point favorite after this past week where they got smoked. Out of those games, I'm excited to watch the Giants and the Cowboys. I think that's right middle of the day, 4:30 after everybody eats, or right around when everybody's eating or taking their first nap. I think it's a division rivalry. The Giants have been playing fairly well, coming off of a loss this past week, though. Cowboys coming off of a huge win, so it could be a little bit of a letdown spot for them after riding high against the Vikings, thinking maybe that they can win this game easily. I do think the Cowboys should still win, and probably by a touchdown, but I think that it should be a pretty good game.
Yeah, winner of that game is pretty much in the driver's seat for the first wild card spot in the NFC. Especially by beating a divisional opponent. I think this is the first time those teams have met, both being over 500 since 2005, if I'm not mistaken, on Thanksgiving Day. I think so. It's kind of a new territory for those fan bases, actually having a meaningful game on Thanksgiving. And kind of weird that Washington's not playing on Thanksgiving. They changed the name from the Redskins, and now they can't play on Thanksgiving anymore. They used to always play on Thanksgiving. But yeah, should be some exciting games. I'm excited to see how the Lions perform against the Bills, because on a 3-game winning streak, and the Bills, yes, they've won. They obviously just beat the Browns in Detroit. Maybe they're a little bit more familiar with the turf in the stadium, so maybe it's not as big of a home field advantage for the Lions. But I'm definitely excited for that one. And then the Vikings Patriots, I want to see how the Vikings respond, because losing 40-3 at home is laughable. So you got a Patriots team coming in off a win. So it should be good. I wish there was a way that you could bet like all 3 games to be 1-score games or less. I wish
I'm
you
sure
could do
somewhere
that.
there is
A prop for that. But let's get to the rest of the slate. Hope everyone enjoys those football games on Thanksgiving.
I will say one stat I heard real quick. I think it was something along the lines of Bill Belichick against winning teams with winning records but negative point differentials. So you saw the Vikings are -2 point differential on the season, even though they're 8-2, which is crazy. Bill Belichick against winning teams, or teams with winning records with a negative point differential, is 10-0 against the spread. So something to think about.
Just something to think about. Just sprinkling that out there.
Yep.
Excuse me. Vikings -2 point differential. Jaguars like plus 15 or 16 point differential, and the Vikings have 5 more wins. So this league.
Okay.
Rest of the games coming up on Sunday for Week 12. What's the best game of Week 12 outside of Thanksgiving Day football?
I don't think it's going to be a very pretty game, but I think the Bengals-Titans will be a good rematch of the playoffs last year. Titans get them at home again, and last time that happened was in the playoffs, and the Bengals beat them on the road. So I think that'll be a good game. I think we'll kind of know if the Bengals are back. They started the season rough, but have been looking good lately. So if they can beat a team like that on the road, they are favored. I think that's huge. So looking forward to that. What do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the only answer this week. But that's not to say that there's not going to be some close games.
Right.
But as far as best game with, conference implications, records, I mean, like the Bears-Jets, that very well, I feel like, is going to be a good game. The Falcons-Commanders, good game.
So I think Justin Fields might be out. I think that's some news that maybe just came across recently, because the Jets are 6-point favorites, and that should not be the case, especially if they're starting David Mills, unless Justin Fields is out. Mike White, sorry, whatever, interchangeable. Unless they're starting Mike White. So I don't know why they're 6-point dogs. I think that means that Justin Fields might be out with that shoulder, or potentially out, so I'm not sure.
So fans went from potentially seeing Justin Fields versus Zach Wilson, the number 2 pick from 2020 or 2021 draft, and the 7th overall pick from the 2021 draft, to seeing Mike White versus who's the backup in Chicago.
I think that's our boy. Not Chase Daniels.
No, I think he's on the Chargers.
It's Trevor Siemian, I think.
Trevor Siemian. So that's kind of a downer for fans that were expecting to see Zach Wilson and Justin Fields. But yeah, a lot of good games, a lot of ugly, bad games record wise, but I think a lot of potentially good games score wise and whatever. Chargers Cardinals could be a fun one too. We'll see. Those divisional games are always good. Chargers took the Chiefs to the brink too. Did you see that stat first of all about Patrick Mahomes on the road against divisional opponents? He's a perfect 15-0.
Oh yeah, I think I heard something crazy like that.
Well, and I think they're on like a 20-game winning streak in November and December. So they haven't lost a game in November or December since like 2019. And he's on a 15-game winning streak since he got drafted, against divisional opponents on the road. Absurd numbers. But the Chargers did push the Chiefs to the brink in Week 11, 30-27 loss there. Let's get to lock of Week 12. Lock of Week 12, Kyle.
All right. Well, I know we try not to pick the crazy spreads. That way we pick the competitive games. I'm going to go with the Bucks at the Browns. I think the Bucks could be making their little push here. I think maybe things are moving down there. Things are happening. So Julio Jones, great touchdown when he was over in Germany, kind of out of nowhere. So yeah, I don't know. I think the Bucks over the Browns.
I like it. All of me wants to say Commanders Falcons, but the Falcons are a team that I can't get figured out because nothing about them says they should be good, but they just beat the Bears last week. They, I think, beat the Panthers a few weeks ago. They're winning close games, but I'm going to go with the Seahawks over the Raiders. Seahawks are 3.5-point favorites, just like the Bucks are to the Browns, but I'm going to go with the Seahawks. I think that is poorly handicapped, 3.5 points over the Raiders. So I'm going to go with them as my lock of the week. Here's a question for you. If you had to guarantee one of these to hit as far as the big spreads go, you have Dolphins 13.5 at home versus the Texans, or Chiefs 15.5 at home versus the Rams. Which one of those would you take?
And we also got the Cowboys and the Giants, but of those two, I'm thinking the Dolphins 13.5.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, 15.5 points in the NFL is absurd, especially going up against the reigning Super Bowl champions. Like, it just nothing about the Rams makes sense to me this week or this year. But upset special in Week 12, Kyle. What is your upset special going to be?
I think it's going to be the couple on there I like. Yeah, I think it's going to be the Patriots over the Vikings this week.
Okay. 2.5-point dogs.
2.5-point dogs. Like I said, that stat about Belichick. I think Kirk Cousins in primetime, historically not the best. I think it could be a slow-paced game. I think it's going to be the type of game that Bill Belichick really wants to show out for, and hopefully Mac Jones can put something good together. I would love to see the Patriots win. I do like the Vikings, but I like seeing I kind of like seeing Bill Belichick be Bill Belichick.
Yeah, he kind of turns into that villain as soon as the Leafs start changing colors and he gets that half-sleeve hoodie going that's all stained like he just painted his living room and never washed it. Maybe he hasn't washed that since like 2004. It just feels like it's the same hoodie.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
It's true. But he turns into a different person come Thanksgiving time, it feels like, and maybe he turns them around to a wild card spot in the AFC, and it could start with a huge win over the Vikings on Thanksgiving Day. I'm having a real tough time with this one. I'm not going to lie, because a lot of the close spreads, like the Bengals-Titans 2 points, I like the Bengals there. I don't like the Falcons over the Commanders as an underdog. I would take the Panthers, but the Panthers are in shambles, but the Broncos are terrible. I'm going to go with I'm going to go with the Steelers over the Colts on Monday Night Football. I'm confident in that one as an upset special, and also on a confidence scale, maybe I'm 4 out of 10 on that one. All the other ones, I'm like 1 out of 10. I do not like the other upsets I could have picked. with the Cardinals, Chargers, things like that. So I'm going to go with the Steelers over the Colts. The Steelers just lost 37-30 to the Bengals, obviously showing that they can put up points. I will say the Colts had a very inspired effort against the Eagles, losing 17-6. Jeff Saturday maybe
16.
What's up?
17-16.
Sorry, excuse me. It took a fourth quarter, 14-point quarter for the Eagles to come back in that one to extend their record to 9-1. But yeah, I'll go with the Steelers in that one on Monday Night Football. What's up?
I like that.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. But anything else from you before we call it an evening?
No, excited for this game. Like I said, I think it could be closer than I originally had thought looking at the stats here and everything, but we will see. I feel like it could easily go. And I know we said the same thing with the Chiefs game. If they get up early, it could get ugly. We kind of, hung around. It was never super close, but we just got to eliminate mistakes. Like I said, little things that are costing us field position or costing us possessions.
Yeah, you can't give them any free possessions. You got to take advantage of every possession you have offensively if you're the Jaguars, even if that means coming away with a field goal or pinning them deep inside the 10-yard line or so. You got to do something to put them at a disadvantage. That's what it's going to take. But anyways, I appreciate you being here. Episode 142 for those listening on Spotify, Apple, Google. Thank you for subscribing on your podcast streaming platform. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe and like the video. Help support the podcast any way you can. Bringing you Jaguar content, trying to keep you interested in this football team. No, I know you are. You're a diehard Jags fan if you're watching this. But appreciate you again, Kyle, being here. Those out there listening, go enjoy Thanksgiving. Go enjoy some Thanksgiving Day football, college football rivalry week, and NFL Week 12 coming up Sunday. But whatever you do, go make this world a better place and take care.
How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man? How can I be the man when you're the man?